Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener support.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And welcome to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Paul Stevenson, here for the next 2 hours. I'll be live with you. That's 7 to 9 p.m. here in, well, Bangladesh or Mosul or Sudan or Senegal or, I don't know, wherever. They call it London. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours here live. That's 2 to 4 Eastern Standard Time in the US, and also 9 till, I think it's 11 till 1 p.m. Pacific Time on the West Coast there over in the US. Welcome to the show wherever you are around the world, and I hope you've had a great weekend. Anybody listening to the show on Friday, I was covering the whole situation in Italy with the migrant crisis there, and the NGOs essentially facilitating and encouraging these migrants. They call them refugees. They're economic migrants from Africa really. They're coming through the corridor there in Libya. They're the whole thing's been funded by George Soros and the international Jew, who is hell-bent on destroying the white race and the white European national ethno-nationals and the Christian faith in Europe. And, Sudan, Chad, Ethiopia, Senegal, this is where the majority of them are coming from. They're not fleeing the war in Syria. Although the war in Syria, as well as serving the state of Israel and as usual, getting the United States and the NATO allies to go and fight the wars over there to get rid of any sovereign government that they perceive as a threat in that region. It's also served them well as a propaganda operation to flood Europe with illegal immigrants, basically, under the guise of humanitarian, fleeing war-torn civil war in Syria, which is not a civil war, of course. It's just an Israeli attempt to remove a sovereign government there. Nothing civil about it. Basically, Western-backed, Western-armed mercenaries and Western-backed, Israeli-funded, Israeli-backed, US-backed, created, funded ISIS terrorists. So that's not a civil war, but it served them well because, as I say, it's given them an excuse. And the wrecking of Libya has opened a corridor there from the rest of Africa into the northern border there, North African border to come into Europe. But as I said before, these guys, they're not economic. These guys are, you see them coming across. They've got they've got the best of trainers on and jeans on and mobile phones, and they're just like, they're not fleeing war-torn countries. And, whatever these countries, whatever poverty or difficulties they're experiencing, it's not the responsibility of the Europeans. And our press here, the prostitutes, the Jewish-owned, Jewish-driven narrative in the press is always, what are we going to do about this? I don't know. What's Africa going to do about it? It's not our problem. It used to be that generous and well-meaning, generous European peoples, and they have been, when there was problems, say, of famine in Africa, whatever, and other types of problems as well, we sent money through, through charitable donations. Phone, it never seems to stop with one sort of charity in Africa after the other. But now you don't have the free will choice in being generous on the matter. No, apparently it's your responsibility, and you have to not send money there anymore but you're responsible for what's happening over there, and you have to take them into your country. This is the new narrative. This is the new reality of asylum seeking and refugees. As I said before, they are not refugees. They are illegal immigrants who have been under the false illusion that Europe is somehow neutral for all to claim by Jewish advertising campaigns, not just in Africa, but in India, in Bangladesh, in the Baltic, Eastern European nations. Everyone is flooding into Europe at the same time. This is a militarization, this is a weaponization of peoples to eradicate the ethno-nationalist European nations, the white nations of Europe, and the Christian faith by international Jewry, facilitated by their little whores in their pockets who are selling out the countries that we call our politicians. So I started off there. I mean, I was looking, you know, this is where I left off on Friday, but I'll get to the second. This is I should rename this show "Diversity is Our Strength." I came across a story the other day. It's in the Mail, it's in the Metro, it's in the Evening Standard. I think the best article I have on it here is in Breitbart, because you know, the press over here is so liberal that you can tell when they're telling a story that it's not only do they tell the story in little bits, but it's an apologetics ministry all the while as well, to make it acceptable and to minimize the extent of it. Someone said to me at the weekend, "Oh, I'm shocked at your views on immigration." When I put them across that we are becoming a minority, and we're already a minority in London, and that you're all around the world. You know, in China, Chinese people are the majority. In Africa, Africans are the majority, almost to the point of 100%. You know, in Korea and South Korea, those countries, it's Koreans and who are the vast majority. In Argentina, in Brazil, Brazilians make up the vast majority, 90+%, I'm sure. The same in Argentina. It's only in Europe where we're dwindling, and our numbers are, you know, our women are not having children. 1.3, I think, in Germany. I think it's like 1.3 here as well. And then you add that to flooding the country with foreign nations and cultures, particularly from sort of India and the Middle East, who have untold amount of children. You can see where it's going. It doesn't take a genius to work out that it's a genocide of the white European peoples. And someone said to me, you know, they were a bit shocked by my views on immigration. And I explained to them my position, that we, you know, are becoming a minority, and we are already a minority in London. I mean, 44% white, you know, would our white British people make up 44% of London now. That's it. In another 5 years' time, that's probably going to be likely to be about 35%, because the indigenous people leave because they feel like foreigners in their own land, in their own country. And if you came and saw where I live, you would understand what I mean. And plenty of other parts of London. But this person on Facebook said to me, well, maybe you just think, and she was actually just genuinely asking me. She wasn't having a go at me like a lot of these aggressive liberals and commies who just, they can't wait to call you a racist and a xenophobe and all the rest of it. I mean, that's the great tragedy of all this, isn't it? You know, the indigenous people here, many of them, the lefties, they don't even know when they're being invaded. I mean, these people will literally be eradicated and will be sort of die at the hands of an Islamic machete, all the while still saying, open the borders, all are welcome. That's how brainwashed. They are brainwashed to the point of entire hopelessness. And it breaks my heart to see that we have swathes of our population who sign on to this nonsense in the EU and immigration. I mean, these people are crazy. And they just call us racist, Nazis, white supremacists. Yeah, white supremacists, yeah. We're becoming a total... there won't be any of us left in about 20 years if it keeps going at this rate. As I say, our women are not having children because the attack is on our women. Abortion, pro-abortion, pro-birth control, women having, children later and later, or attempting to have them later and later because of feminism and having careers. Divorces are off the charts. So you have a group of people who are coming from, families which are broken, which have got a negative aspect towards marriage and even having children because they're scarred from their miserable childhoods because of their parents' divorces. So there's all sorts of schemes and tactics and legislations and attacks on the indigenous people having children. Meanwhile, as I said, all the when I'm over at Tesco here across the road from me, it's not just at the places like, there's no white faces around and all the burqas and the hijabs and all the rest of it. But a lot of those burqas, there's a lot of swollen bellies around. Every other woman you look at's pregnant. And this person I was chatting to on Facebook, she didn't do the usual attacking, you're a racist, you're a xenophobe. She sort of asked me a few questions and I told her what I thought. And one of the things she said to me, do you think it lowers maybe you think it lowers the tone of your country? And I think it does. Yeah. I mean, first of all, it creates a dog eat dog attitude where the indigenous people, where their parents and their grandparents built the culture here where it doesn't have to be like that, where we can be a bit more civilized. All of a sudden, it's just literally, if you want to go to university, you got to compete with all those Indians and all those Arabs and all those ambitious people who are going to be studying round the clock to get their degree that you're up against. And you're up against everyone for jobs, and they're going to work 60 hours a week if they can to get ahead. And they do get ahead. A lot of the Indians, for example, I mean, they end up as doctors and lawyers and dentists, and I know a few of them. They end up in those positions whether they like it or not because their ambitious parents have forced it upon them. We worked here. We worked 2 or 3 jobs for you. When we first came here, we lived under rough conditions in the air when we first came here, and so that you could have a better future. And you will be a doctor, you will be a dentist, you will be a lawyer, you will go into politics, whether the kids like it or not. So you can see how that would affect just and I speak to English people, like a lot of English people that they're just, and rightly so, they don't want all this heavy competition. They're quite you're average English person. They're quite endearing, really. They're just my friend Scott and some of the people up in Mildenhall, and they just want to just have a kind of a normal life. They're just working class people. They're not overly ambitious. They've been kept down by aristocracy all their existence, really, and they just want to have a home and a couple of 3 children and simple things like most of us. Same in Ireland, really. Don't want to competing against a bunch of, uber ambitious people who've just arrived in the country and think because they've got a British passport that gives them a right to be British. Well, it does. Passport, it's not like you get your degree and you're like, I'm now a lawyer. Oh, look, I've got the paper to prove it. I'm a solicitor. I'm a lawyer. I passed. It's almost like that's the way passports are perceived. Look, I'm British. Look, I've got the paper to prove it. Well, being British, being Irish, being French, or being Indian, or being Chinese, or anywhere else for that matter, goes a little bit further than just having a bit of paper. You're talking about a peoples that make up a nation. But do I think it lowers the tone? Yeah, I do. And if you ever need any convincing, have a look at this story. A new report from the London borough of Redbridge has revealed that almost 1 in 5 of all child deaths in the area since 2008 were down to their parents being close relatives. This is in the Daily Mail. It's also in the Metro. It's in the Evening Standard. But as I say, I'm going to actually read the bulk of it from Breitbart because our media is so there's so much spin on it. The Mail says Redbridge Council heard 19% of 200 child deaths due to parents being related. Reports show genetic defects were causes of death between 2008 and 2016. 9% of the infant deaths were in Pakistani families, Council heard. Educational programs, unquote, have been rolled out to warn parents of dangers. Yeah, and our kids are in these schools trying to get an education, and it's a kind of a given with the ethno-nationalists and normal people in this country that you don't go around sleeping with your sister or your first cousin. But now we have to have educational programs now interfering with our own kids to even distort their minds that people even do this stuff. Talk about lowering the tone. 1 in 5 child deaths in East London and the East London borough are occurring because the baby's parents are related, a report has found. A meeting of Redbridge Council's Health and Wellbeing Board heard 19% of the 200 plus infant deaths between 2008 and 2016 were, quote, attributable to consanguineous relationships, incestuous relationships. Why don't they just use the word incest? Couples who are at least second cousins or more closely related. I guarantee you second cousins would not cause death. Second cousins might cause the child to have a low IQ. It might cause the child to have erratic behavior. It might cause the child to look pretty ugly. I don't think second cousins on the whole will be the majority of the deaths here. It'll be first cousins or sisters or something, brothers and sisters. That's what the reality of this would be. The causes of death have been identified as, quote, genetic and congenital abnormalities. I'm reading this from the Mail. It goes, council health bosses were also told 9% of the children who died were from Pakistani families in the borough. And the rest of them were from Asian families, as they call Asian, which is just basically Indian, Bangladeshis, Middle Eastern, that whole area, that whole word Asian covered, that's what we mean. Sort of Middle Eastern Asian or Indian kind of thing. We're not talking about Chinese or, or Japanese people here. The statistic was discussed at a meeting of the Redbridge Council Health and Wellbeing Board on Monday, with the matter of child fatality being raised. The recording, so I've read that out, marriage or otherwise sexual relationships between couples who are first cousins or closer. Oh, this, you see, Breitbart says first cousins. The Daily Mail here says, and this is a right-wing kind of newspaper, the Daily Mail has said here, who are at least second cousins or more. So Breitbart says sexual relations between couples who are first cousins or closer, which is what I think is probably the most accurate. So probably the Daily Mail, despite being apparently a right-wing, right-leaning newspaper, is softening this by saying second cousins. Of course, leftists would probably argue that Breitbart is a Nazi operation. So they'll say, oh, they're going to say that. But I would say that's closer to the reality, because I don't think that first cousins, second cousins would cause death. It might cause some other problems for sure, but not actual death. So in the article on Breitbart, actually, that's interesting. It says, as I say, they say the council's report found that the consanguineous relationships, unquote, marriage or otherwise sexual relations between couples who are first cousins or closer. So they say first cousins. The recording year of 2009-2010 saw the highest number of child deaths in the period. Of all deaths in that year, the second greatest cause was chromosomal genetic or congenital abnormalities. Overall, 65% of child deaths occurred before the age of 1. The Ilford Recorder reports, Ilford's an area in East London, as is where this is coming from, Redbridge. The Ilford Recorder reports the remarks of Child Death Overview Panel Chairman Gladys Xavier, who told the meeting there were ongoing education programs targeting Asian communities in the area to address the prevalence of incest, which the paper referred to as a, quote, continued problem. Talk about lowering the tone, folks. This is what we bring into this country. This is what goes on behind closed doors in large parts of boroughs of London. First cousins and brothers and sisters sleeping with each other and having children. Isn't it illegal to have children? Is it not even illegal? I don't think it's legal. I don't think it's illegal to marry or have sex with your second cousin, but I think it is with this. I'm pretty sure it's illegal to have sex with a first cousin, or certainly with your brother or sister. The 2011 census found that 41% of Redbridge residents identified as Asian or Asian British. And the religious makeup of the area was 36.8% Christian, which if you went back 20 years ago, that would have been about probably 70%, 65, 70% probably. And you can be guaranteed that there'll be no incest happening in that little category. 23.3% Muslim. That's where it'll be coming from, because the Muslims are up to their neck in the old incest. And 11.4% Hindu. And as I say, Muslims, that whole part of the word, Muslims, Indians, you're getting this sort of incest stuff. And you can't tar all Muslims and Indians, obviously, with that. But this is where it's coming from. Concerns over incestuous relationships in Redbridge focus around particular communities in the borough, with the report stating the practice is, quote, most common among Pakistani communities, unquote. And the same pattern can be observed in Redbridge. Well, there you go, ladies, British girls. If you want to, you want to keep your gene pool strong, go and have a baby with a Pakistani man. Good genes in there. Talk about diversity is our strength. These people, they can't get beyond having marrying their first cousins. How much diversity got on there? Of all child deaths in the area in the time studies, 9% were to Pakistani ethnicity parents and were the result of genetic complications arising from having related parents. Despite the attempts to reach out to these communities, there was a concern the educational drive was falling on deaf ears. Yeah, because listen, it's their culture. You may as well tell Italians not to eat pasta. The great irony is, of course, is that, we accept this and we bend over backwards. We hear, Councillor Joyce Ryan, it's always women, isn't it? They're always quoting these things, told the board meeting, quote, although everyone is battling hard at this, it is something that communities struggle to accept and sometimes do not want to accept. Yeah, well, why should they want to accept it? And the Mail here and other more left-leaning reports, it says, Joyce Ryan told the programme meeting the communities were finding it difficult to accept, and then she went on to say, other councillors said it was a sensitive area and was being handled as such, with the council, quote, moving in the right direction. Meanwhile, the recorder said the council's director of public health, Vicky Hobart, again, another woman. There's no man in the whole sort of social services system, it would seem. It's run by women. Vicky Hobart defended the statistics, of course, and said the report should not be misunderstood. According to the paper, she said, incest is very common in many cultures, and the worry with something like this is that we are dealing with very small numbers. We shouldn't have to deal with it in any numbers, okay? If these people want to come to our culture, they can stop practicing abominable practices which are in stark contrast to more enlightened Christian and Greek philosophical cultures. The great irony, of course, is if we went to certain Muslim countries, we would get our head chopped off for having a beer. It is more important to note trends, but we should not read too much into it. Usual, soft pedaling, and we must be very understanding for these people, you know what I mean? It's just what they're used to. Listen, you're not going to stop these people doing it. It's the young lady questioned me on Facebook, wondered about lowering the tone. I think for the small amount of people, Pakistanis, I don't know, I think it's something they make up like 1.8% or 2 point whatever of the UK population. They make up 4% of the incest problem.